everyone. My name is Robert Jenkins. I'm the Global Director of Education for UNICEF.
Double-click.
Thanks very much for joining us this afternoon. I know how busy everyone is. I'm really excited about this session, I think for two reasons. One is the actual content that we're going to be discussing, the importance of mother tongue language instruction in foundational literacy and numeracy. But from a kind of a broader perspective, I'm also very excited because I think this is a topic that's doable, at least somewhat, in 40 minutes, unlike many of the sessions that we've all been involved in the last couple of days that remain quite at the higher level. I think we can delve into some very interesting discussions in the next 45 minutes. You'll see the esteemed panelists online there, except for myself, that's not one of the esteemed people, but the other four, very esteemed. I think we're very fortunate to hear from true global experts in this area. We're going to be zeroing in on three pieces of work that have been supported by the World Bank that's related to this topic. One is Loud and Clear. Second is the Advancing Arabic Language Teaching and Learning. And third is Read at Home. And you're going to hear far more about each of these soon from the panelists. So as you can see on the screen, we have with us, Hanada Taha, the endowed professor of Arabic language from Zayed University, most welcome. Andreas Blom, who's online, one of the practice managers, but focused on education for the Middle East and North Africa, and also Amanda Devricelli, who is the one of the senior education specialists also at the World Bank. So most welcome to sorry, and I think did I forget Jaime Saavedra, of course, my counterpart at the bank, the Global Director of Education, and a very close colleague and friend. So thank you again to all of our esteemed panelists. I'm going to just jump right into it. We will have an opportunity to have some dialogue. I will be quite strict as a moderator so that we open up and have a discussion from all of the people who have kindly given their time to participate. Jaime, I think you're on the hot seat first. As the Global Director of Education for the bank, under your leadership, and I've seen it myself, the language of instruction has indeed taken a very prominent role in your overall agenda in how to reduce learning poverty. So the specific question is, can you set the context for us, and why do you feel language of instruction is so critically important to address learning poverty?
Look, thanks, Rob. To set the stage, even before this pandemic, we were already living a learning crisis, right? More than 50% of kids were not able to read and understand a simple text. That was already a huge crisis. That number was even larger, right? In low-income countries, the number was close to 90% in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, with the pandemic, right, we don't have hard data for all the countries, but we're simulating that number could be increasing up to 70%, right? Which is a gigantic shock. And unfortunately, we already have some data that shows that in certain countries, and unfortunately, that simulation happens to be true, right? That actually learning poverty, that percentage of kids who cannot read and understand a text is going up. So we have a huge challenge, and the challenge was there even before the crisis. Why we have that problem? We have issues that, many of our teachers do not have the right motivation or preparation. The inputs might not be there. But one huge challenge and one huge barrier for effective learning at school is that, unfortunately, in many countries, kids are not being taught in the language that they speak at home. Right, so think of any one of you going to school and being taught in a language that you don't understand, you don't speak that at home, and sometimes not even the teacher understands. But the textbook, right, is in that other language. Now, that's not a minor issue, right? We have 37% of children in low and middle income countries are taught in a language that they do not understand. Right, so that's in part behind the high rates of learning poverty that we see in sub-Saharan Africa, and particularly in sub-Saharan Africa and in the Middle East. Right, we have that problem in other regions in the world. We have that problem also in parts of Asia. We have that problem in Latin America. We have that problem in my country, in Peru. But it's even deeper, right? And in sub-Saharan Africa and in Middle East. When children as opposed to that, are taught in a language that they speak, right? Of course, they will get those the fundamental skills, faster. They will be also better placed to speak other languages, and they're more likely to stay in school and to enjoy the process, right? Think of any one of you, what process would you have enjoyed if you are taught in something that you barely understand? Now, we do have evidence that there are effective language of instruction policies, right? And there are a few principles that countries need to follow, right? They really need to start teaching children in a language that they understand, at least in the first years, right, of primary education. And then use that language, right, for instruction in other academic subjects. And then little by little start introducing an additional language, first focusing on oral language skills. And then continue with that language and use, I'm sorry. That's okay. So there was a presentation, but that's okay. And then continue with the second language and learn some academic subjects also in that second language. Now that's not easy, right? That requires a lot of planning, a lot of developing, adapting, and the implementation is complicated. And why is complicated? Because that requires careful language mapping in a country, right? There are many countries in which parts of the country will speak one language or two languages, these other parts of the country, other set of languages. Sometimes the languages are mixed in one part of the country. So you really need to know what's that right language in each part of the country. You need to have the right teaching materials, which is not easy because you need teaching materials in different languages. Then you need to recruit and deploy and allocate teachers the right way, because in this part of the country you will need teachers that are bilingual in these two languages, and this other part of the country in these other languages. So that's a complicated endeavor. You need to measure and assess if learning is happening. Technology can help, right? But it is a complicated endeavor. But really, all children should be taught in the language that they understand. And let me close, Rob, with one reflection regarding the experience in Peru, right? Where I had the honor to be a minister before this. In Peru, with 3 languages, you cover about 80% of the population. With 22 languages, you cover 95% of the population, right? If you really want to cover 100% of the population, you need to go up to 60. It was impossible to develop materials and to train teachers in 60 languages. That was very difficult. We started with the first 3, right? With Spanish, Quechua, and Aymara, right? And with that, you cover a good chunk, right, of children. And we started developing materials in the next 22 languages. What's the main challenge? Actually developing materials and sometimes even creating a new alphabet, right? Because there are sounds that exist in one language and different sounds that do not exist in other languages. I was lucky to even approve new official alphabets, right, for some languages. But actually, even if developing material is complicated, the most complicated part is to have teachers, right, in the different languages that you need, and train them and have them having the right language skills and the right pedagogical skills. That's more complicated, right? That's why in Peru, there have been progress, but we're not there yet. Right? There are still many children that are not being taught in the language that they speak at home. So it sounds like obvious. Let me close saying that. It sounds like obvious, right? You need to teach children in whatever they understand. That really sounds obvious. Well, that obvious thing is not happening. And truth be told, in some cases, it's difficult. It's a difficult endeavor to do it, to do that. But we need to do that because it's the only way we're really going to be able to eliminate learning poverty. Over to you, Rob.
Very convincing, Jaime. Very fascinating, too, on the challenge you faced as a previous Minister of Education, too, on the implementation of translating policy to practice and all the complicated nature. I'm going to encourage our other panelists, and I'm going to shift now to Andreas Blum, but to now move beyond the argument of how important it is to teach in a mother tongue. I think unless anyone wants to still be convinced, let's take that as convinced. So let's move to the how. What works, what are the challenges to make this happen, etc. Just so we don't make some of the mistakes I've been on in other discussions is we spend a lot of time on still convincing each other. Unless somebody wants to put their hand up and say, no, mother tongue, forget it, let's go with English everywhere. No, we're good?
Or French or Spanish.
Or whatever, right. So let's go with it, we're convinced. So we're going to drill now into the how. I'm going to pass to Andreas Blom, as I mentioned already. We're going to, he's from the practice manager in the Middle East and North Africa. We're going to do a deeper dive in the how this issue now is translated here in the Middle East and North Africa. Andreas, I think you're going to come, there you are, over to you.
Good, excellent. Rob, thanks so much. So to start where Jaime left us, the learning poverty in the Middle East and North Africa, we have it estimated around 6 in 10-year-olds are not able to read and write with comprehension. That's pre-COVID. With COVID, we're estimating around 7 out of 10. So it is a big issue in the Middle East and North Africa, even though there is strong access to the education system. So to go to specifically, as you say, to what are the factors that are behind this? For the Middle East and North Africa, we have the advantage that the vast majority of the children speak a version of Arabic at home. And most of the countries teach in Arabic. But the specific here is that they are learning a different dialect when it comes to reading. It is the Fusha. It's the modern standard Arabic that has to be learned how to decode and read that. And that differs from the colloquial version that is spoken in most of the countries. So overcoming this barrier, it's not a different language, but it's a different version of the language. And that requires a specific approach from how you teach it, in terms of vocabulary, in terms of grammar, and in terms of spelling. So that's the first challenge that has to be overcome in the teaching. The second factor that we are talking a lot about, and we'll hear more from Amanda, is reading at home. So the families in the Middle East, unfortunately, tend to read less to their younger children. And we're talking about those that are from the age of 1 up to the age of 5. We only have around 25% of the parents that are reading to their children in this early age, compared to around 75% for those higher performing countries where the children learn better how to read and write. And that's very critical to prepare their vocabulary, to learn for them to focus, and to learn that letters are symbols that transvert sounds and words. So that has to be increased. And then the enrollment into kindergarten and preschool is critical for the Middle East as well. And there's a large expansion going on. I can talk a little bit more about that afterwards. But early years is critical as a second factor. A third factor is, of course, teachers. We all know how critical teachers are. If we ask the children in the Middle East, they will say, we love Arabic, but we don't love the subject Arabic in our classes. They would say it's a little bit rigid. It's a little bit boring with a focus on memorization and grammar. And that we think is very critical to change and make it more fun, make it much more engaging and creative in the Arabic teaching. And that means we need to support teacher training, both at the university, but also how it's rolled out, with a much more focus on practical approach to teach Arabic. So those are the three things we're focusing on. Let me leave it at that, Rob, and go over to the next question if I'm so lucky to have to.
Thank you very much. Very helpful. We are gonna hopefully get a chance to loop back, but we also want to hear from the audience. I think if it's okay now, we'll turn to the professor. Professor Taha, thanks so much for coming. Really appreciate it. You've written, I know, many different pieces on this, including most recently a report. What do you think? What advice do you have on solutions?
Thank you very much. I get to hold the microphone here. With solutions, I think it will start from where both Jaime and Andreas described some of the challenges that we have. So early exposure to modern standard Arabic. So Arabic is this diglossic language where it has the various dialects in different countries, even within the same country. And we have the modern standard Arabic which is what we read in books. This is the language of schools. It's one and the same language, but with a continuum where things sit differently on that continuum. So the earlier the exposure to Modern Standard Arabic is, the more we are helping or scaffolding to the child how to bridge that distance between those two varieties. So this is something crucial to get that awareness to homes, to the community at large, to the media, via cartoons, via whatever the kids are on today. It will be crucial to do that. Some other solutions would be those who do the curricula. We have an issue in Arabic with curriculum designers. The curriculum would start, say, in grade 1 or kindergarten at a level that is even developmentally very high and hard for the children. So the idea is to have that attention to the fact that we will need to have a bridging phase, a period where we are trying to bridge the dialects that they come with from home and ease that transformation or that transfer and move into Modern Standard Arabic. So things have to be carefully orchestrated. The phrases we use, the vocabulary we use, the way we write about topics for the kids at this age, they have to be very carefully written and designed so that it eases that move from their dialects into Modern Standard Arabic. Of course, it ties to the curriculum. We need in the MENA region generally to have a conversation of what does Arabic language mean for us? What do we want out of the language? What do we want our kids to know, and how do we want them to know? What kind of a national literacy strategy are we looking at? Do we have national literacy strategies in our countries that with a theoretical and philosophical and pedagogical framework onto where are we going? What do we want? What is the profile of the child linguistically? So by grade 12 or 10 or 8, what do they look like? What can they do with the language? And this will be an important conversation to have in the region. In addition, of course, lots needs to be done with teacher preparation programs. If we go and do a quick scan of preparation programs of teachers in the MENA region that prepare, for example, Arabic language teachers, we will find that those are probably, they belong to the 19th century. They are fizzled with rote learning. There is very little field experience happening. There is very little on hands, like this is going to be a teacher, so they need to know what's happening in the classroom. They need to be learning about children's development, psychology, how can I connect with children. So honestly, there are a lot of solutions, and many countries have started to do some great work. I can mention right now, Saudi Arabia is starting, Morocco, Jordan, UAE. There is a lot of talk and chatter about this, which is very, it makes me optimistic.
Really encouraging to hear. Thanks, Professor, and thanks for that list. I think we're going to come back to it and hear from some others. So all three of you have talked about the school system curriculums, teachers. You've made reference to homes, what happens within the household and what happens within homes. I'm going to pass now to Amanda. Amanda, you, of course, are leading an initiative at Read at Home. Can you speak to us about your experience at Read at Home and how this relates to this broader discussion?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. So very simply put, the objective of Read at Home is to deliver storybooks in languages children speak at home as quickly and efficiently as possible to families that aren't reached by traditional remote learning opportunities. We did start Read at Home in the context of COVID-19, but I think it's important to say it's not a crisis response. Read at Home is a very important way to help countries build systems to tackle learning poverty and build resilience in the face of future shocks. We have extensive evidence on the value of early reading to build vocabulary and key skills to succeed in school, but also for children to learn to love to read, right, and establish lifelong reading and learning habits. And Jaime spoke a bit about this. imagine how hard it would be to learn to read in a language you don't understand, right? So if we can have more children in homes from a very young age, from birth really, with their parents, experiencing holding a book, understanding the direction in which text flows. These are really simple pre-literacy skills and experiences that build foundation for kids for a lifetime, and that we know have impact later on in their learning. So what we do with Read at Home is we really focus on 4 different things, and we're working in 15 countries so far. The first is that we provide technical assistance to countries. And this technical assistance is around either identifying or developing high quality storybooks in the languages children read at home that are culturally relevant and that they can enjoy with their parents or siblings or community members. The second piece is really technical assistance and support for that parent and community engagement piece, right? Because many parents, many families don't have a tradition of reading books at home with their children. And so parents do need support to feel comfortable with that. And there are many studies that tell us that illiterate parents with very low levels of literacy, can be great at reading and sitting with their children if they have simple books with great pictures and simple words, and that will have an impact on children's literacy and also with parent-child bonding. The third piece is technical assistance around procurement and delivery. That might not sound exciting. But we know that many countries are wasting a ton of money every year simply on their procurement systems. And when we started to look at the cost of storybooks across countries, and really any books, textbooks, it's not just a storybook issue, certainly, we found that 2 countries, I won't name the countries, but it's 2 countries right next to each other in Africa with very similar profiles. One country was paying about $7 for a textbook, and the other country was paying $1 for the same textbook, just based on the varying qualities of their procurement processes. So it's not necessarily exciting, but we are looking at procurement and delivery to bring costs down and build efficiency. And then the fourth area is around producing global public goods. Rob, I know we're not going to have time for a second question, so I'm going to take one more minute and talk about some of the success we're having in a few countries. We're working with a number of partners. So in North Macedonia, we've been able to reach all children from the 10% of poorest households between the ages of 3 and 12 with storybooks in the languages they speak. We worked in 5 different languages. There we partnered with UNICEF, with International Step by Step Association, multiple ministries of education and social protection, the Red Cross and Think Equal, to reach all of those, the 10% poorest households in the family with their storybooks. In Ethiopia, we're working with a local NGO to deliver books that have been approved by the Ministry of Education in 3 languages in the conflict-affected region, in Amharic, Oromo, and Tigrinya. We've reached a number of families, even in that very difficult circumstance, with storybooks in the language children are speaking at home. In the Republic of Marshall Islands, we have been able to reach 1,000 families in the outer islands of the country, and we've had a great success there on the procurement and delivery. We've brought the cost of books down from about $9 to $19 per book to less than $2 per book, which means that many more families can be reached and many more children can be reached and many more books can be bought. We are about to launch our biggest effort yet in Senegal. We're going to reach 2 million children, which is about half of all children aged 0 to 6 in the country, through a partnership with schools, community ECD centers, Quranic preschools, and the country's community nutrition platform to cover 50% of all kids in the country with storybooks in the languages they speak at home with their families. So there's been huge demand for this approach from partners, from ministries of education, and from families and community leaders. And we look forward to working with partners to roll it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Very useful, very practical. Actually, let me congratulate all the panelists being very solution-oriented, practical, very impressive. I'm going to open up now. I do have some other questions I've been sort of fed to share with the panelists, but I'd really like to answer the questions that are on people's minds. I think we'll have somebody with a mic. I can't really see very well, but yeah, I see a hand over there. Yeah, please. And maybe just introduce yourself, and then we're going to welcome tough questions.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Shavana, and I'm representing Malala Fund Education Network from Pakistan. Well, we've been talking a lot about teacher training and curriculum, but I believe that at grassroots level, when we see that There is a problem and challenge of status symbol. When we talk to parents about letting their children learn in the local languages, they would not do so. And that is very much prevalent in the households which are under the poverty line as well. They would want to admit their children in private institutions because they teach in English rather than the public institutions because they teach in the local languages. How do we overcome that challenge of sensitizing the parents? And do we have any assessment or data around it? Thank you.
I think it's a great question, and I think probably a lot of people were thinking about that. I have come across that myself. Even though we're all convinced of the importance of mother tongue language instructions for young kids, not necessarily parents are. And interestingly enough, parents, particularly from ethnic minorities that you referred to in Peru and other places, we've seen it. I'm going to take a few more questions. I think the best thing to do, recognizing our time, is we take a few more questions, and then I'll give a chance to just pass back to the panel, and you can pick and choose each question that you think would be most appropriate. A key issue, a piece of the puzzle is going to be how to engage with parents. I've got a bunch of hands over here. Yeah, please. Please, and just introduce yourself and throw out your tough question. Just hang on a sec. There we go.
Hi, I'm Noah Serenjoji from AfriKids. We're based in the UK, but our work is in Ghana. My question is, okay, it's great introducing languages of they speak at home when they're young. What happens when they get older? Because developing resources in local languages at a higher level is obviously going to be more costly because the complexity of the subjects that they learn is going to go up, and it might be more difficult to have maths or science or biology or algebra or, you know, what I'm trying to say. All these very more progressive subjects in local languages. How do you keep that balance going?
Great question, sir. And are we setting our kids up for failure if they go into a mother tongue and then at 8 or 9 or 10 they're supposed to shift over to one of the national approved language within a government? Then how do they do that? I think it's absolutely key. I've got it in the front row here. Thank you so much. And then maybe over on this side, and then yep.
Hi, my name is Lisa, and I am from the media here, but I teach languages, and I wondered, for many of the local languages that we are, saying that we want the students to start learning in, they don't have a writing system. A lot of them are just oral-based. They're traditional languages. They're passed on through generations. What kind of work is being done to formalize these languages, to develop writing systems and phonemic systems, etc., that could make learning easier? This is a massive, massive thing to do. How are we doing that?
Great question. Oh, you've already got a mic. Fantastic. We're going to shift over here. We'll take a couple more questions, and then just to give a heads up to the panel, we'll go in reverse order as we wrap up with the panel. I had. Did you have, somebody had a microphone? Yes, please, and then we'll just take a couple more over as we go this way. Please, and just go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, this is Al-Anud Al-Ka'bi. I'm from the Crown Prince Court of Abu Dhabi. My question is that how can we have innovations in the Arabic literacy? And I think specifically to Dr. Hanadi. And the second question is that we have so many accents, different accents, when we talk to Arabic language. And so the books are in the pure Arabic language. Do you encourage having books in the local dialect or no?
Right, so mother tongue, kind of a definitional issue here. How far to go literally mother tongue when you're into hundreds potentially of languages, etc., and how nuanced? Maybe a final question. I'm so sorry, and everyone else, please feel free to engage afterwards if possible, and then I'll shoot through the panelists. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Rob, and I work for the Ministry of Education here in the Curriculum Development Unit. My questions are actually in addition to Ms. Al-Ka'bi's question. We're trying to assess how do we benchmark when we say Arabic, what do we mean by that? Because we know that in the textbooks, it's in Futsa, but we know that the dialects change a lot between the different countries. So we were wondering, does that have an impact as well? And if the distance or the variance between that classical Arabic and the local dialect, for example, in Morocco, it might be further than in Saudi Arabia, for example. That's a question I want to ask. And I had to attend another one, so it was to clarify the question at the front when you said something about 22 languages and you said that the lessons should be taught in the mother tongue. Is that correct? That's my question.
Well, come in. I know the question on Arabic. I'm sure, Professor, you're going to be interested in responding to that, seeing that you are a global expert in that. Sounds like many of our participants could have also been panelists by the quality of the questions. Thank you very much for that. Apologies again for the time. We only have a few minutes. I'm going to go in reverse order, as I mentioned. So, Amanda, can I pass the floor to you?
You can, and thanks for letting me go first so I can pick the easier questions. I will take the first two. So the first is on parent preference for English language. I think this is really common across many different countries. And my take is let's be practical and let's meet parents halfway. We're not going to convince parents, and it wouldn't be right to convince parents that learning whatever the formal official language in the country is isn't useful. It will be useful. And so what we need to do is make sure they understand how important and useful it will be also for children to get a strong foundation in their mother tongue, and that will actually help them learn better the language that they think is perhaps more important to succeed later on in life. So I think one is making sure parents understand the evidence of why learning in your local language matters. Two is make it culturally relevant, right? Make it about learning about the culture and the things communities and families value as well. The language is an entry point to that. Three, I think, is make sure parents understand how to engage with their children's learning and understand the difference between a child being able to count to 10 in English and being able to hand you 3 beans, right? So they might be able to count to 10 in English, but they won't know what any of those letters mean. If a parent knows to ask, can you give me 3 beans? That's a way to test, right? So pick it's really about that school and family partnership, so parents understand what their kids are learning and can engage in it. And then on the second one, teaching in local languages in the early years and the transition to later years, I would say that in most countries, it's probably not practical to teach upper secondary or upper secondary subjects in local languages because of the issue that the question raised around the cost of highly technical and specialized languages. That's why we typically recommend, especially if resources are constrained, you focus local languages in the early years of primary, get kids that start, and then the later years with more specialized or complex topics, you can do that more in the language of instruction. But that transition between the two is really critical to make sure kids are supported through it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Professor, can I pass to you?
Sure. Thank you very much. On that same topic, thank you, Amanda. I just want to say that in today's world, we need our kids to be bilingual. It is not acceptable anymore to be monolingual. There are all kinds of jokes about monolinguals. We know them. We need them at least to be bilingual. So in my mind, I feel as a parent and as an educator, this should not be an issue, and we need to lobby and root for the idea that we need our national mother tongue. We need to be solid in those. It's our foundation. It's the smells and the sights and the sounds and the music and who we are. But then we need this world language, whatever that world language we choose for our kids and for ourselves to be part of that world. On Arabic language, I am sorry, they told me I have to always look this way. It's really rude, pardon me. So I'm going to address you and the gentleman here. Thank you for your questions on Arabic. For the distance between MSA, Modern Standard Arabic, Fasiha, and the various dialects, I don't know if you would believe it, but there is only one piece of research that is very a small piece of research on maybe 200 kids in Palestine, the Palestinian dialect, that was done. That is it. So if there is something, a message I would send to the ministries of education in the MENA region is that get your act together, get the funding together to do this massive research on, we need to find what's the distance. In that piece of research, it was found that about 63% between the Palestinian dialect and Modern Standard Arabic is common, is either a perfect match or a cognate. So this is a very high percentage, really. So we need to see for the other dialects, we need to see it on a larger scale type research. What do we do with the books? I think for schooling, للتمدرس, for school books, this is what I have been working on for all of my life, is that we need Modern Standard Arabic, but it needs the version of Modern Standard Arabic that is suitable for a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old, which by default, it will be simplified. We will choose those words that are common between MSA and Fasiha. We don't have to go like Shakespearean Arabic in grade 1. We can really have the Dr. Seuss type Arabic, the fun, the rhyming, all of that. It's really doable. I've worked with so many people before on curriculum, on stuff, and it is doable. We can do it.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And I'm going to pass to Andrea, and then from Andrea to Jaime. Unfortunately, I'm going to just quietly slip out. I've got to be smart, but Jaime will wrap and close it up. But Andrea, I'm going to pass the floor to you.
Thank you. So I will take 2 questions and try to be fast and cover both. First, transition to other languages. That's very critical in the MENA region. If we look at a country like Morocco, the majority of the family speak Darija, which is the local language of Morocco, of Arabic in Morocco, and then that is taught in the basic education system, and then the majority switches to French in the higher education. So you have 2 language transitions through the education system, and they are happening a little bit too abruptly. They need to be very nicely transitioned in the country, so that you have around at least 2,000 to 3,000 words in order to transition in. So the both in terms of teaching and in curriculum and in subject, you need to have this thought out very carefully of the transitions into other languages, and which will be gradually those world languages increasingly. So that's one I wanted to pick up. Then I wanted to mention on the innovation in Arabic language. I think, again, the teacher is critical. The quality of the students that Arabic teaching and teacher colleges in the MENA region generally are attracting is a little bit too low. I think there need to be an increase in the prestige of the teachers, in the motivation and appreciation of it, so that the quality of the students that are attracted in are higher quality, and hence we would have more motivated teachers, and we would have higher quality and more innovation and more fun in those classrooms. So that the teacher quality for me is critical, together with the education, to have more innovation in teaching Arabic. Thank you. Over to you, Jaime.
Thank you very much, Andreas. So let me wrap up just mentioning 2 things. One is that we should convince parents if they are wrong on something. But in this case, it's not that they're wrong. I mean, they're right? The students, their children need that French or English or Spanish or whatever language they feel that will give them better opportunities in the labor market, right? Or in society. So usually they will not be wrong with that. On that, they might be wrong is that it is either or, right? They might be wrong in the sense it has to be that, because then they will not get this language that they are interested in. On that, they might be wrong, because actually, if children are taught in the language that they understand, then it will be easier for them, right, to do the transition, right, to what we call an L2, right, to do the transition to the language that the parents want. In most cases, as Amanda was saying, it might not be practical to do secondary education, right, in mother tongue. Right, but I mean, actually, if you have the basis of mother tongue in primary, then you will have that for life, right? And I would say you shouldn't stop at saying, okay, your mother tongue plus the other majority sometimes or language in the country. I would say no. You need to shift then to another language, right? So actually, I wouldn't go. It's not that not even bilingual. Right, and we have had discussion in some countries. Yes, you do your mother tongue, then you do the French, and then, well, you should do in secondary start as soon as you can with English as well, right, or with Chinese. Right, actually, the capacity of children, right, of absorb 3 languages is there, right, is there. And actually, why not? I mean, actually, in this much more interlinked world, right, having 3 languages is something that, I mean, it will be extremely positive for their possibilities in life, right, and their capacity of not only be citizens of their country, but also be citizens of the world, right? However, the only additional trick, right, or things that we're adding in this discussion is that, look, all that could be easier if they start with mother tongue, right? It will be easier. Now, and let me close with saying that, yes, it will be easier from the pedagogical perspective. Is that easy from a political perspective, or is that easy from a managerial perspective in terms of organizing that framework? No, it's not easy. But why? Because sometimes there are many mother tongues. Sometimes there is no alphabet or there is no script, and you have to create the script. I mean, investing in even in primary education materials, it might take years. It's not something that you do automatically. It might take years, and it might take time, and it might take money, right? So we're not saying that this obvious thing to do is something easy. Obvious doesn't mean that it's easy. It is complicated. But if we really want to eliminate learning poverty, you really want to make sure that all kids by age 10 can read and understand, it's very important that we do as much as possible, but in order to teach in their mother tongue. And when we were saying that learning poverty is about learning how to read at age 10, it's not, I mean, and Hanada would know that better than me, it's not arbitrary, right? It's by the end of primary. It's not the same 10 than 15. Right? The way the brain develops is that you really need to read and understand at a certain age. It's not the same. Say, well, no, that doesn't happen at 10. It will happen at 15 or at 18. It's the same. No, it's not the same. It's not the same. It has to be on time. And even 10 is like, we're being very generous, because when we say learning poverty is the capacity to read and understand a simple text by age 10, we're putting a very low bar, right? I mean, for many of us who have kids at age 10, we don't expect them to read a simple text. We expect them to read a short novel, right? So even that learning poverty definition is a very lax definition. And even with that, we are at that 50, well, now probably much higher than 53% because of the pandemic. So yes, we are living a learning crisis, and that learning crisis is worst because of the pandemic. And one of the key elements to try to combat that crisis and eliminate learning poverty is to invest in teachers, invest in the books, in terms of best management in schools, and make sure that kids, as much as we can, learn in the language that they speak at home. So I want to thank to everyone for the interest and for their participation, for our colleagues in the screens. Professor, thank you very much for your participation, and let's keep on going and enjoying the conference. Thank you.
Thank you.